The previous videos illustrated that animals act as moral agents, making decisions for moral reasons, such as enhancing the welfare of their group, maintaining harmonious relationships, and preventing conflict within the group. This video will demonstrate how animals reduce conflict and foster harmonious communities. In animal cultures, the moral choices that animals make can be observed in the rules and rituals of their societies that serve to maintain peace. That animals will choose to follow rules in order to avoid fights has been experimentally proven. Animal cultures have rules for everything, from land ownership to democratic group decision-making. They have rituals for conflict management, peacekeeping, and reconciliation. Knowing the rules allows individuals to avoid conflict, and most individuals prefer to follow the rules than risk the consequences. The animal world is governed by rules that we can't see, that dictate land use, territorial claims, and the rights to various resources. Animals have to learn complex rules that govern land use, from no-go zones and private property, such as homes, burrows, nests, and trees, to shared spaces, resources, and territories reserved for familiar residents of the neighborhood, who collectively defend it from intruders. Individuals have to take all of these rules into account when finding a home, with sufficient and accessible resources. Animals look for sufficient food, water, and shelter in choosing a territory in which they will call home. Rules of ownership may come down to first come, first serve, or homes and territories may be inherited. Young animals don't just have to learn the complexities of social order, but also boundaries, territories, and their home ranges. Just as we have boundaries governing where we can go and when, so do animals, and they learn the consequences of crossing them. As animals move, they will remember where they have gone in the recent past and modify their future movements accordingly. Animals concentrate their activities within areas we call home ranges. Most animals, and certainly all mammals, store information about places in cognitive maps. Animals will learn the boundaries and owners of adjacent territories, which reduces the need for conflict once territories are laid out. They have to learn rules governing territory, not just in space, but also in time. In the breeding season, most species maintain territories, defending areas ranging from the immediate vicinity of the nest to extensive areas in which a pair not only nests, but also forages. Individuals don't just learn rules about where they cannot go, but also when. The environment changes with the seasons, and so does the demand for various resources. Because resources are fluid over time, so are the rules governing them. The tendency to hold territories varies among closely related species, within species, and through time. For example, sanderlings may defend feeding territories involving a short stretch of beach during high tides. Typically, territories include sites of egg deposition, burrow entrances, nest sites, food plants, feeding space, advertisement perches or display sites, roosting sites, shelters, grazing areas, food stores or communal caches, foraging space, and even patches of sunlight in the forest. Birds may defend multi-purpose territories for which it is difficult to identify a single key resource. In most cases, conflict is avoided because individuals respect territorial rules. And when rules are respected, neighbors live in peace. Some animals use a strategy termed the deer-enemy effect, in which two neighboring territorial animals become less aggressive toward one another once territorial borders are well established and they are familiar to each other. But aggression toward unfamiliar animals remains unaffected. Animal fights are relatively rare, even when territories are spatially clumped, resulting in frequent interactions between neighbors. Once territories are established, individuals in neighboring territories typically respect territorial boundaries and withhold aggression from their neighbors. Although the birds react defensively to protect their own territories from intruders, they cooperate peacefully with non-aggressive neighbors. Even if they are of a different species, two different species can identify individual birds from other species, and they form long-term partnerships to defend their shared space as a group. A vast amount of time and effort in the animal kingdom is devoted to gathering information about outsiders. Outside threats and opportunities likely present animals with a range of cognitive challenges, and strategies involved in defending territories require considerable brain power. Individuals keep tabs on what belongs to who and recognize individuals violating territorial rights and causing conflict. Sparrows are able to identify troublemakers by eavesdropping on them. A study has shown that the birds can tell who started it in a neighboring squabble over territory, even if they are not directly involved. They then respond aggressively to the songs of the intruders, but not to those of the victims. The research has shown that song sparrows can distinguish an aggressor from an innocent bird that has had its territory invaded. They seem to be able to infer that the victim is not at fault. Immorality is recognized as breaking rules, such as rights of ownership or property. First come, first served, and territory ownership are examples of rules adopted by humans to avoid aggression and increase mutual benefit. Some animal species follow them too. For example, when an animal finds itself in an area belonging to someone else, it retreats and looks for another unoccupied place. But what about mammals like rodents? Do they have the capability of learning these types of rules? Researchers observed that mice develop a social rule, reward zone allocation, by splitting the territory and taking it in turns to share the reward zone. Mice who respected the rules and waited their turn were rewarded with longer reward times. The majority of mice chose to wait for their turn. Those who didn't were forgiven in order to keep the system going. If a mouse violates the rule, the other mouse has the choice to retaliate immediately or tolerate and keep on observing the rule. Tit for tat brings a disruption of the system, while tolerance to partners' mistakes allows the system to continue, and as a result, both mice receive a long-term benefit. It limits aggression and is better for the long term. These findings suggest that rodents can learn to make and observe rules to resolve conflict. Researchers have demonstrated that animals will even change their social rules depending on different circumstances to reduce conflict. The social behavior of mice is not rigidly fixed and depends on the environmental context. In situations where water or food supply may be limiting and the mice are living in relatively low densities with large territories, they display territorial behavior, and males mark their territory. When mice are living in dense populations with small home ranges, they switch from territorial behavior to a hierarchy of individuals, and aggression is often mediated as the risk of injury becomes too great. Another way animals avoid conflict is by ritualized displays. The frequency of actual fighting is greatly reduced by ritualized threat and appeasement displays. Fighting is avoided by using warnings, such as deposition of visual or olfactory cues, or ritualistic displays. It's only after land rules have been broken that individuals resort to fighting. And those who have had their territory violated may bring in allies to help. Researchers found that ravens remember an individual who consistently raids their caches if they catch him in the act. Sometimes a raven will join in an attack on an intruder even if he didn't see the cache being raided. Biologist and raven expert Bernd Heinrich writes, "It was a moral raven, seeking the human equivalent of justice because it defended the group's interest at a potential cost to itself." Subsequent experiments confirm that group interest could drive what an individual raven decides to do. Ravens and many other animals live by social norms that favor fairness and justice. Rather than being motivated by the selfish genes once used to explain a species' behavior, rules-based behavior is motivated by a knowledge of the laws of the land. And different species may form long-term partnerships to defend themselves and their territory. Mixed species flocks of birds are observed all over the world. These groups can include up to 100 individuals of 60 different species. Both birds and mammals join forces for the common good, which is group safety, lending their unique abilities. And mixed species herding reduces the effects of predation risk. The flexible and innovative strategies that animals use to avoid violence demonstrate conscious decision-making for the purpose of avoiding it. This is demonstrated not just in territorial rules and shared defense of territories for the common good, but also in rituals among their own species, where competition and conflict are unavoidable. Through rituals, animals communicate their interests and perceive and perhaps acknowledge the interests of conspecifics, whether to mate or to fight, or to socialize and participate in an overarching social order. As animals are increasingly recognized as having forms of behavioral plasticity and large communicative capacities, the question is no longer whether meaning distinguishes between human and non-human forms of rituals. It's whether or how the more developed theorization of ritual in humans pertains to and is applicable in analyzing other social species. The most familiar and common rituals involve mating, with another related set featuring forms of fighting. Rituals also manifest in mundane forms, such as greetings and leave-taking. These communicative interactions signal a willingness by individual animals to comport themselves in accord with their shared social conventions. For ethologists, the underlying function of rituals is to diffuse or contain aggression. Birds often engage in elaborate courtship displays to compete for mates, which can include territorial fights. But these are often ritualized and rarely result in serious injury. Although horns and antlers can kill, fatal injury is rare. Researchers observed that out of 1,308 sparring matches between male caribou in Alaska, only 6 matches escalated into violent, bloody fights. In the vast majority of cases, what we think of as fights are solved without any injuries at all. In mouflon sheep, fights rarely cause serious injuries, and the winner does not make any further attacks. After the fight, the two will graze together, and every now and then, the winner starts what is called an appeasement ceremony by presenting his neck for the other to lick, sometimes going down on his knees. Stress hormones and heart rates increase during conflicts, even in bystanders. And bystanders will often step in to break them up. Individuals may get between those who are fighting to keep the peace. And some individuals choose to involve themselves more than others. Pigs regularly step in to break up fights. When conflict breaks out between 2 pigs, a third pig will intervene and appear to smooth over the problems. The rivals make up and bystanders offer consolation to the losers. Evidence of post-conflict reconciliation in domestic goats suggests that one of the functions of reconciliation is to reduce the victim's arousal or anxiety. Studies found that males who lose their social status after fights can spiral into depression. After monkeys fight, their heart rates rise and remain elevated for several minutes. If monkeys reconcile, their heart rates return to baseline levels more quickly than they otherwise would do. Small gangs of monkeys who bump into one another frequently engage in hugging rituals to preempt peaceful relations. If the other monkeys are seen as rivals, there is a danger that fighting will erupt. Hugging seems to be a way to ease the tension. The monkey's hugs may be analogous to a human embrace or a handshake. Animals have innovated many different ways to keep the peace and de-escalate social tensions. Male mice may de-escalate aggressive encounters with other males by staying near females. Researchers observed that a male mouse who was aggressively encountered often ran over to one of the female mice, and that this de-escalated the aggression. peace is maintained and conflict avoided by both social gestures and social rules. Individuals make moral decisions for their actions, which are motivated by the desire to either keep the peace or cause conflict. Decisions affect the good of the group, and group decision-making also has its own set of rules. How do groups of animals, including humans, make decisions that affect the entire group? Evidence collected from schooling animals suggests that the process is somewhat democratic, with nearest neighbors and the majority shaping overall collective behavior. Researchers monitored all the individuals within a baboon troop continuously over the course of their daily activities. Even within this highly socially structured species, movement decisions emerged via a shared process. Thus, democracy may be an inherent trait of collective behavior. Collective decision-making has been extensively studied in the context of negotiated route choices, in situations where component individuals initially express different preferences based on their personal knowledge to date. For example, despite living in societies heavily structured by dominance relationships, at a fine spatio-temporal scale, baboons are more likely to follow routes suggested by multiple individuals than to follow the most dominant. Choice tends to occur as a majority of the group progressively express a preference for it. The pattern of compromise decisions being made when the angle of disagreement is small and a winner-takes-all decision emerging when it is large has been found in a variety of analogous contexts and species, including the choice of homing paths in pigeons and of travel directions in wild vulturine guinea fowl. Individuals often vary in their knowledge of a single factor, such as the location of a resource like fruiting trees or nest sites. However, knowledge concerning different factors might be in play. For example, some baboons may try to initiate movement towards a food resource they know of, while others initiate alternative routes to avoid an area they know has recently been frequented by a significant predator. The group as a whole may be able to generate an adaptive overall response that weights both factors. The specific weighting that different individuals' inputs receive may vary according to their current physiological needs, motivational states, or the reliability of their information, leading to more flexible integration of pooled preferences. For example, in plain zebras, lactating females, i.e., those with the highest water and energy needs, are more likely to influence the herd's movements than non-lactating ones. Democratic decision-making processes are not unique to humans, and democracy isn't just a human invention. Scientists now view many animal societies as de facto democracies, with majority rule ensuring group survival more than tyranny can. Shared decision-making is likely to be of great importance for the evolution of stable social organizations, explaining why it appears to be common in social animals. Red deer herds typically favor democratic decisions over autocratic ones, and decide to move when 60% of the group vote to go somewhere. African buffalo often make group decisions about when and where to move. Only adult females vote, and females participate regardless of their social status within the herd. Imagine a herd of wild horses in which some of the mares are expending energy nursing foals and therefore need to eat and drink more than other members of the group. This gives rise to different preferences. Some horses might prefer to sleep, while the nursing mothers wish to move to a new grazing spot. Many kinds of animal communities must make ongoing decisions in the face of diverse interests about when to move, where to go, where to sleep for the night, how best to evade predators and other risks, how to organize eating and mating to avoid conflict, how to play safely, and so on. And it turns out that animal communities have developed a fascinating variety of practices, not just for coordinating one-to-one behavior, but also for navigating group-level decisions. Sometimes an animal group in which members have different interests breaks down into smaller subgroups of individuals whose choices are more aligned. For example, the nursing mares, who have a common desire to find nutrient-dense pasture, while other members of the herd prefer to rest. At other times, the group comes together and makes decisions for the whole, especially when collective security is concerned. Zebras often live in groups comprised of one male and several females, with the males assuming leadership in some key ways. The males don't succeed by enforcing their will on the group. Instead, the most successful males provide the females with more time to graze, and they fight off any interloping males, harassing the females. For this, the males pay a price. They have less time to eat and need to work continually to keep their status high. Male plain zebras also weigh the differing needs of group members. Lactating females often attempt to lead the group to water before others are ready. Male leaders will force the others to go along, but not at first. They wait to minimize the conflict inherent in the situation before prompting the rest of the group to follow, a compromise wherein lactating females end up waiting longer than they want, and non-lactating females stop eating to go drink sooner than they prefer. Basing group decisions on compromise demonstrates that animals factor in fairness when making moral decisions about the well-being of the group.